Tango Gameworks dropped one of the most interesting concepts for a game seemingly out of nowhere, an action game where the world sings to the music. I saw so many people praise this game before I inevitably played it myself, but I honestly didn't think I'd like it going into it. I didn't want to play a rhythm game or another beat 'em up action game that doesn't evolve as you play, and I really didn't want to experience a cringe over the top story. Thankfully, after finishing Hi-Fi Rush, I can say I couldn't have been more wrong. Hi-Fi Rush doesn't only have great combat, but it also has ever-changing gameplay moments that surprise you every hour, a fun soundtrack that enhances every single moment of gameplay, fun level design that encourages you to come back for more, and a story that it's not too bad. The combat in Hi-Fi Rush invigorated a part of my brain that I didn't know existed. Having great fast action combat paired with a world that sings to the music was a surprisingly great experience for me. I had never liked rhythm games before playing Hi-Fi Rush, and my girlfriend calls me tone deaf whenever I shout a song I'm listening to. So honestly, the idea that the world sings to the music was a little bit off-putting to me going into this game. Sure, it seemed incredibly unique, but I thought I'd end up playing against a core gameplay mechanic instead of working alongside it. Luckily, the game does a fantastic job of drip feeding tutorials to you that not only makes the mechanic of attacking at tempo feel incredibly rewarding, but also very manageable. When I say the world sings to the music, I mean literal rocks will move to the music, which greatly helped me get into the groove of Hi-Fi Rush. The reason it's even important to stay on tempo in the first place is not only to deal slightly more damage to enemies, but to give you the same rush that rhythm games manage to give you. It's the foundation for every future system of this game to build on top of, especially the combat. And as I mentioned earlier, this game is ever changing, so much so that it isn't until the last few hours of the game that you're not learning or gaining new abilities to mow down enemies. Smashing your guitar into an incredibly diverse cast of enemies whilst calling for backup depending on the enemy type, paired alongside combos that are bombastic as my entire body is moving to the tempo of the music, is something that I've never experienced in another video game. It's invigorating and is paired alongside many other forms of gameplay that make sure you never really know what's going to come next. Some bosses are exactly what you'd expect, a giant enemy that smacks you around with some flashy mechanics to keep you on your toes, while other bosses challenge your rhythm skills that I was unfathomably awful at. Regardless, each boss is exactly what I want out of a boss fight in an action game like this. Each boss is a test that is at the end of your class session that is filled with pop quizzes, or I should say that each boss fight is a culmination of literally everything that you have learned from the level leading up to said boss fight. If most of the level encourages you to parry enemies, you better expect a boss fight that is comprised of no way of hurting the boss outside of parrying, which segues into how each level is built, which, as with almost every portion of this game, is ever changing. Before you even have a chance to think that the levels are dull because of rinse and repeat gameplay moments, Hi-Fi Rush throws a new way to play the game at you. If a level is comprised of a lot of fighting, expect something new to come your way. If the previous two levels were surrounding a boss that is traditional, expect a future level to throw you into a large sequence where you run for your life. If I had to use one phrase to describe the level design in Hi-Fi Rush, I'd say constantly evolving. Thanks to this game being pretty short at around a 12-hour experience, the developers made every level feel unique. It could be that the music stands out, the enemies were cool, or that traversing the level was just outstanding. They've also managed to make levels filled with things to do outside of fighting enemies. There are jumping puzzles, collectibles, and upgrades stashed into corners. And to my surprise, each level was also filled with characters to talk to that give more context to this world, but more importantly to the boss you're going to be fighting soon, giving a bit more tension and a bit more reason to care about what you're doing. It also helps that the game has a sort of transparent formula as to what you're doing in this world. The story very early on sets you on a concrete path as to what your goals are. You're a kid that fell into a marketing trap of a mega corporation that wants to mind control people using prosthetic limbs. It so happens that you undergo the process of getting a new robot arm, but in that process, something goes wrong and your iPod gets lodged into your body, giving you the ability to be in tune with the music of the world. Following this super comic book-like exposition is a very comic book story of a kid gathering together some soon-to-be friends to take out this mega corporation that not only fucked him over, but the entire city over. There are 6 big bosses or higher ups that have regents over a different section at this mega corporation, whether it be marketing or security. The point being, it's a really fucking video gamey story, which of course doesn't make it bad by any means, but having 6 big bosses in their own sections or levels of a mega corporation that are all visually diverse and filled with different enemies makes a lot of sense for a video game. Outside of gaming, however, I definitely don't think the story is anything that great, and I'd be lying if I said there weren't moments where I cringed pretty fucking hard. I will say there were some pretty fun high action moments and bombastic cutscenes to watch, but anything further than that really wasn't that impactful for me. With the last thing to talk about, I guess being the end game, and if there even is one. I think it's pretty annoying when games are given a bunch of unnecessary content to force players to continue playing their dog shit ass game. Thankfully, Hi-Fi Rush's endgame doesn't force me to do homework that I don't want to do. The endgame consists of backtracking through prior levels and unlocking areas that weren't previously there. However, I'd say most of the focus is on the Rhythm Tower. The Rhythm Tower is a pretty normal system to have at the end of lots of modern video games. Go into a level that has a pack of mobs, kill them, and ascend to the next level. There are numerous bosses from earlier in the game and rewards sprinkled throughout, but the gameplay loop isn't much more than that. I guess it's probably pretty fun for players who are really competitive with themselves, or people who want to climb a tower and watch their high score or floor number go up. But honestly, I'd rather just replay through prior levels and harder difficulties. These sorts of systems are just baked into so many modern games that I've become pretty numb to them. Regardless, there is more content to do if you want to do that, and the game feels very complete after the credits roll, which I'm super satisfied by. In total, Hi-Fi Rush is a great action game that makes you physically move to the music as you're smashing robots together. I think the experience is so one of a kind that I'd recommend people give it a shot if they've shown any interest towards action games in the past. And oh my god, Corsica